Good morning, friends. My name is Sandra Clay. I'm the pastor at Cook's United Methodist Church. Welcome to our patio. You can see over my shoulder we've got some busyness going on today, so I'll do my best to speak over the saws and the giggles. I just want to say a word of appreciation to the Boy Scout troop that's connected here to our church. They're working on restoring some picnic tables that have seen a lot of life. And now they'll be able to see even more. So thank you to all of our friends. And thank you too for your patience yesterday. I don't know what in the world I was thinking, trying to record and to do 12 million things at once. One of these days I might learn from that, so just keep praying for me. Thank you so much for all of the ways that you have continued to pray for one another. You are a source of encouragement and inspiration. We continue to remember Herman and Jean and all of those, Charlene and others who have let us know that they are struggling, but we know that you will get better because God is always faithful. So chin up and relax, rest best as you can. We also pray today too for those who are not able to get in from out of the heat, that they would be as safe as possible and good folks would rise up and offer all the help that they can. Yeah, so it is a day, is it not? So on this Thursday, I was running my mouth, so I didn't get to type in anything about kind of what we're doing, but let me just say we're covering a little bit of Isaiah 13 to 16, chapters 13 to 16. I've got a couple of remarks about that. And then 2 Chronicles 29 to 31. So rich with some information we need to hang on to, and that's where the bulk of we need to think about this stuff will come from. And then a little bit about Isaiah 18 through 21. And so that's where we are. We're covering a couple of days and some thoughts about those things. So we have been introduced now to 6 prophets. Most of them are working, their ministry carries them into the northern kingdom, and they all have different personalities. They all have different ways about them. They've all been chosen by God. They're all offering words that are both predictive. It really is a kind of, well, in the truest sense of what we understand as prophecy. They couldn't know this. Then there are prescriptive kinds of things that really are, now that's my choice of word, that really are kind of naturally consequential. Because you won't change from doing X, Y, and Z, then don't be surprised when A, B, and C happen. So that prophetic message it comes in waves of both of those kinds of words. And by reading carefully the way we are as we read together, we're going to discover that those prophetic words that Isaiah spoke, that Hosea spoke, are not just for the people called Israel, both northern and southern kingdoms. There were prophetic words spoken over enemies that are surprises for us. And so you might want to have a pen or a pencil close by and jot down some things if these did not stand out for you as you read. So in Isaiah 13 through 16, what we need to recognize is that period of time when what the message that Isaiah was sharing then was right about the time that King Ahaz died. Whether it was right before his death, right after his death, sometime in that year and a half, these words were spoken, and there was so much doom. Listen to this kind of stuff. This was in chapter 13. Wail, calling on Israel to wail, not just cry. Let it all out, because the day of the Lord is near. There is destruction at hand. And that kind of destruction, when it happens, all hands will go limp. Every man's heart will melt. I'm going to tell you, I wrote in my Bible whenever I was rereading this, that those are the kinds of feelings that I had when you hear reports about Uvalde, Highland Park, when we hear about even more destruction, waves and waves happening because of war. And Isaiah even talks about Israel as a hunted gazelle, or sheep without a shepherd, running like chickens with their heads cut off, don't know where to go, can't find good pasture land, think they're going to be destroyed. Yet in chapter 14, we get a brief passage, verses 12 through 15, that seem to people like us on this side of the cross, this side of resurrection, that maybe God is saying a word about Satan, and that Satan's power and authority are going to come to naught. The Philistines have been prophesied over, and destruction is coming for them as an enemy of God. And Moab, which was in cahoots with many of the enemies of Israel. This repetitive phrase, you will be ruined, destroyed in a night. Well, it takes longer than a day or a night to build a city, but that's how quick the destruction will come. And right on the heels of this kind of prophetic message from Isaiah, then Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, takes over the reins, so to speak. He becomes the sovereign king. And the first month of his first year, he reopens the temple of God. He calls the Levites together. We'll talk about why the Levites in just a moment. But he called the Levites together and reminded them, though I am summoning you, God is the one who has established you and called you for such a time as this. And every part of the Levite clan was represented as Hezekiah pulled them all together. It took about 2 weeks, and they completely cleaned and consecrated the temple, prepared it to be used as a house of worship again. And what's the first thing that Hezekiah did after the temple was restored and reopened? He called together all of the city officials. He called together Jerusalem's leadership, those who would serve the people by serving him. He called all of his leadership team together. They went into the temple, they made proper sacrifice, led appropriately according to God's law, not performed by Hezekiah, but by the priests and the Levites who were there. Listen to this from 2 Chronicles 29. This is verse 34. The Levites had been more conscientious in consecrating themselves than the priests had been. Worship leaders, songwriters, musicians, gatekeepers, guards of the treasury. There are this whole list of things that the Levites did that were not the most important part of worship or sacrifice within the temple, but now it becomes absolutely crucial because they have paid better attention than the priests have to how they would present themselves, what their full role is, and they were ready. Not only does Hezekiah invite the leadership of Jerusalem to make sacrifice and to worship fully and appropriately. Next, and now this moves to the close of chapter 29 in 2 Chronicles. Hezekiah and all of the people rejoiced at what God had brought about for his people because it was done so quickly. And they got in there and worked, and once they tackled jobs that were both saddening and a little scary at the same time, they began to learn and work together about what it is that God requires, and discovered a joy about their work, and God made their work fruitful and successful and made it quick. In chapter 30 of 2 Chronicles, now Hezekiah he sends letters to all of Israel and all of Judah, to both the northern and the southern kingdom respectfully, and invites them to return to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. It's not really the correct time, but they haven't, as a people, done this since the time of Solomon, when the kingdom split and Jeroboam and Rehoboam began to reign. There had not been a gathering like this in Jerusalem, and the people had not remembered together that we are together the people of God. Not enough priests had consecrated themselves to be able to handle everything that would happen in this Passover gathering. And so Solomon prays this beautiful prayer that God would pardon those who had not consecrated themselves appropriately, that though they were church legally unclean, that he would see their hearts and hear their prayers and receive them and their worship, and he did. The result of this gathering together for worship is that Israel was reminded again in total of who and whose they were, and their response was to destroy all the idols that were in their areas, maybe even in their homes. They were to tear down all of those places where they could and where they had worshipped other gods. That's what happens when we gather as a people of God. So my friends, whether you're still gathering online, whether you're still connecting digitally or virtually to a worshiping body, let me just encourage you to keep on keeping on. And those who are ready to worship in person, that you would remember that there is something else, something more important than just gathering at a place that happens in that place. It is when the Christ in me and the Christ in you find a way to connect, that we offer not only a purer worship of God, but we are reminded, encouraged, and inspired by one another to live into the power that has been given us by God to worship. This is the power of worship. Oh, when we come together, they destroyed their idols. Let me say a couple of words about the two Psalms that are listed there, Psalm 66 and Psalm 67. I love what the Chronological Bible has to say about those two Psalms. We don't really know the time that they were written, but they seem to imply the events of this particular time period. So maybe they were written about this time. And so Psalm 66 is offered to us as a celebration of who God is. But I love this, especially Psalm 67 is listed or named as a missionary psalm. It is about our mission, my friends, as the people of God. That is to praise and to worship God. And when we stay close enough that those are not just perfunctory words, they really do come from our heart, because we recognize how God is around us, what God is doing for us, who God is by nature, then we are made wiser. We discover we are stronger and braver than we ever realized before, and we are ready for the rest of the mission, and that is to share the good news with everyone else. This knowing of ourselves as a result of knowing God begins with worship. And I just want to say, I extend all kudos that are possible for those of you who are not the professionals in the church bodies that you represent. It is the hearts of the faithful, like the Levites, who are ready, who help lead, who do all the jobs that prepare and assist folks to worship and make it possible for us to do that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As we move into July 6th readings, at least it's the 6th on my reading plan, 2 Chronicles 31 and Isaiah 18 through 21. Let me just say a couple of things about Hezekiah as we close the Chronicles work. Hezekiah restored the temple in order that he could, that Israel could return to worship, because returning to worship would invite them and usher them in as they return to God. And Hezekiah knew exactly how important that was. Now, I want to say this. They've got not just a new regime. This is not just because Hezekiah likes doing it this way. You've got the people of Israel hearing the invitation from their king. But you've also got Israelites hearing, both from the northern and the southern kingdom, in their ear, all of these words from the prophets. And some dismissed those words, just like they dismissed Hezekiah's invitation to come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. Some didn't come. Some came but weren't really prepared. But God saw the desire of their hearts. God also saw those who didn't give a whit. And listen to this word about Hezekiah from the 2 Chronicles 31, verses 20 and 21. Hezekiah sought God in everything, and he worked wholeheartedly. And that's the reason why he prospered. We don't do something in order to prosper in God's eyes. That's buying your grace. That's trying to earn God's favor. But it is because we commit ourselves completely, and then we work wholeheartedly as an act of love. Watch what God will do through you, for you, despite you, and despite me. When we move to Isaiah 18, 19, and 20, or 18 and 19 in particular, I want you to notice this. These words of prophecy against people groups is not directed toward Israel. Now that we know people are turning their hearts back toward God again, Isaiah has a word for those who become allies with Assyria, Ethiopia, Egypt. Those are the general areas with modern names we recognize. But when we read Cush and some of the Hannah and some of those other areas, that's exactly what Isaiah was talking about is these who have become allied with Assyria. Better watch yourself, because destruction is coming for you as well. And that kind of destruction is represented by a word that you and I know way more about than we ever wanted to. When you read whirlwind, I don't want you just to imagine a whirling dervish, a whirling dervish, though that is destructive enough. I want you to think about the impending doom that is coming because folks have dismissed God and they have played religion just to get what they wanted, what they believed they needed. You and I have both seen the destructive backside of a whirlwind. We call them tornadoes. You've seen the destruction. The whirlwind is predicted. And not only do we have the words, but now we have, from chapter 20, this difficult scene. God instructs Isaiah to strip down to his skivvies and to take off his shoes. Walking barefooted was a sign of poverty or idiocy at the time because of the roughness of the terrain. And when your feet are sick, the rest of you is sick. So down to no shoes, God seems to be saying, literally and figuratively through the prophet Isaiah, this is what's going to happen when God comes. But it's not about the predictive for Israel. It is about those who have allied themselves against the people of God and against God in God's fullness. Ooh, we know what the whirlwind is like, don't we? I don't want to know. I don't want to experience it again. Though there are tiny whirlwinds in every day that you and I will live. I want you to hear in these difficult messages God's return, his promise to return to compassion, to return to choosing Israel again. As a matter of fact, that's a part of this work that we read in Isaiah. Let me give you the 14, Isaiah chapter 14, the very first verse. The Lord will have compassion on Jacob. Remember, that's an older term for Israel. It's like he's going old school. The Lord will have compassion on Jacob. Once again, he will choose Israel and settle them in their own land. There is hope, my friends. God promises that his anger is not forever. The whirlwind is for his enemies. You can know and trust the heart of God to be one of compassion and tenderness. My prayer is that you trust in that. Who doesn't these days need a bit of compassion and understanding? And my friends, if you trust that you are receiving that from God, do what you need to do to soak it in, to really receive all of it, but know that once you have received it, it is our responsibility and our privilege to live it, to be compassionate, to be merciful. Where is it that you need compassion and mercy in your life right now? Would you take a few minutes today to just sit with God? Oh, you don't have to find words. You don't have to find thoughts. Just invite God to be present with you. And then ask God to give you what you need to be compassionate with others, to be tender with others, to extend mercy to others, and watch what God will do. The joy that it must have brought Hezekiah to see hope return even before the onslaught. of the Assyrians. May you and I, regardless of what might be coming tomorrow, be convinced and find hope in God's compassion today. Lord God, we thank you for another beautiful day. We thank you for folks like these Boy Scouts and their leaders who so gladly serve others. They become for us the attendants of God. They become like Levites, preparing us though that we might be prepared to come before you. Thank you, God. You're calling us all, raising us all up in that same way. Some of us are better prepared than others. Some of us are readier than others to step into a time of service. But your invitation comes to every one of us. And it starts discovering our gifts, our graces, our strength, our power, our joy. All of it begins in worship of you. To offer you our gratitude and our thanksgiving. To offer you please for pardon, for recognition of how we have fallen short. And you so graciously restore us and draw us up, pull us to you, and you empower us to send us out. May we discover today anew, God, the joy, the powerful joy of worshiping you right where we are. And may we also discover the power, if we have let it grow to be usual as we worship with all of your people. Whether we can be present with them or not, Lord, you call our hearts to be united together. And we thank you for Hezekiah's wisdom in doing just that. More than anything, Lord, we invite you to be present with us today. Point out for us where in our own lives, in our thinking, in our attitude, in our relationships, especially in our relationship with you, where we need compassion and mercy, where we are raw and need healing, for the purpose of gaining strength because of your sovereignty and your power that you so willingly share, that we might extend compassion and mercy wherever we go, to whomever we meet. Help us to carve out some special time just with you today, God, that we might replenish our hope and our joy. And we give you thanks in the name of the one who is the source of it all, even Jesus the Christ. Amen. My friends, it's been a joy to be with you. Thank you for all of your support and your encouragement. I hope to see you all soon. Bye.